Hi everybody, sorry about the delay. I got booted out of the room and I couldn't get the technology to work in another room. So we're going to do a crash course of what you need for the homework assignments, generally questions 10 through 20. So it's looking at the graphing and the equation information. So the first bit of information that you need to know is that how math represents points. Points are always, there is a location on a grid. We're not going to worry about having to graph too much in this class, so I'm not going to focus on the graphing because I've got a very condensed period of time to do this today as opposed to normal. So points, what they do is location of a space on the XY axis. I'll give you some more information on the XY axis later. But points in general are just some X and a Y. So math being lazy and how they like to confuse people is that's their code. So if you get something that's written like 3, -2, that's just another way of saying X equals 3, Y equals -2. Okay, so, and we're going to use that information for equations and finding slope and stuff, but for questions, I think it's 10 through, let me look. Sorry about this. So for questions 10, 11, 12, and 13, they're determining if the ordered pair is the solution of the equation. So what it's doing is, if something is something's a solution, that just means you're going to be plugging in the values. And if you end up with something that's true, it is a solution. If you end up with something that's false, it's not a solution. But only simplified. Okay, so then let's look at some examples, not specifically from your homework, but for the next step. Okay, so it's just a sample problem just to test whether or not something is a solution. So first suggestion that I give you, let's give you some steps. So your point is usually a number and another number. So what we're going to do is right above them, the first thing that we're going to do is label this as an X and a Y. So that you remember, I do extra labeling so that I don't get things mixed up. I like to see things on paper a lot better than try to keep them jumbled in my head. Okay, so first step first, label my X and my Y. That's great. Step 2, let's plug it in using parentheses. Okay, so anything that's already in the problem is just going to say that. So what I'm starting with the problem is 5 is from the problem. I don't have anything to change with. But then I'm coming back to a Y. And from Y, from what I have labeled, Y is the 4. That's from your equation. That 4 is from the equation. I can't change anything. But then I come to an X. So instead of an X, I'm going to put parentheses and a -4. And then I put the rest of the equation. How's yourself?
Oh, I like that.
I just got a meeting going, so I clapped.
Oh, I didn't know that. Sorry.
All right, so parentheses, then we get, that's all I needed you to do. Then step 4 is to simplify it as much as you can. Or step 3 is simplify. And by simplifying, that means simplify each side by itself until you can simplify no more. So looking at the left side, have to get rid of order of operations, so I have to get rid of parentheses first. There's nothing to do inside of them, so I'm just looking at what is 5 times 4. So negative 4 times a negative 4. So a negative times a negative is a positive. And 4 times 4 is 16. Now I can still do a little bit more with this, because I can combine those two terms. So what's 20 plus 16? Is 36. And then I look at the right side. I really can't do anything because it's just a 13. Now, do I have something that's true or false? Does 36 equal 13? This is false. So, is negative 4 a solution to the equation? Your answer is no. Because I ended up with something that's not true. So that's all you're doing. You're just substituting and put it in the right spot in the equation. So that should get you those first 4 problems of your homework assignment. Then we get to the next pages, next problems. You're looking at find 2 points on the graph of each equation, including the y-intercept. Intercepts we're going to talk about in a second, but finding equation of a line. For 14 through 16, so finding any points, you get to plug in anything for either of the letters. So I usually start with an easy number, so I put in a 0 for 0, 1, and 2 for the x, and whatever you get for the y is going to be your second point. So we'll look at those in a little bit later. But I want to look at some equations and what intercepts really are. Okay, just like in football, an intercept is where you catch something, and in this case, it's where the line is caught by the action. Not horribly essentialize the point at the moment, but we're going to get into some specifics in a second. Okay, so what we're going to specifically look for is we've got these very specific notes that you can put for yourself to remind yourself. There is a question on the final that does ask for the x and y intercepts of an equation. So basic stuff of what you're going to set up with is x-intercept. And I set up my work exactly like this. I make it 2 work areas, so there's x-intercept and y-intercept. And then specifically what I have to think about is I need to know if I'm looking for an x-intercept. I'm only going to see an x in the equation, so I get to say y equals 0. Because I want the y to disappear. Y won't be in the problem if I set it equal to 0. It's the easiest number to work. And then for the y-intercept, I only want to see y left in the problem, so in this case I have to say x equals 0. That's the first step. Any problem that's asking you to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept, easiest thing to do, set it up like this where you have the x-intercept and then you know to yourself y equals 0, y-intercept, x equals 0. So, giving you an equation, y, 9x plus 12y equals 36. All you're going to do is do 2 separate problems, even though it looks like 1, it's really 2. And For the x-intercept, I see to start with y equals 0, so I'm going to rewrite the problem. 9 is already part of the problem. X, I didn't tell myself anything about the x. I'm looking for the x. So it's staying in the equation. Plus 12 is part of the problem. Now instead of the y, you're going to replace it with a 0. And remember, whenever you replace something, put it in parentheses just so that you remember that you replaced it. Later on, it might make life a little easier. And the rest of the problem is equal to 36. Now all you have to do, solve it. Get x by itself. So, looking at this, 12 times 0, I like that. That becomes just a 0, and I don't have to worry about it. So I have 9x equals 36. Getting x by itself, I have to undo what I've got. So it's 9 times x, opposite of times, is divided by. So divide both sides by 9. Okay, and I get, let's scroll down a little bit, x equals 4. So now, remember, they're going to give you your answer as a point again. And remember, points are always x first, followed by the y. So I know my x is 4. And my y, I set it up way back here, so y is 0. That is your x-intercept. Okay, I'm going to put the 0 in for x so that y will be the only thing that's left. So looking at this, I go back to my equation. I have a 9. I come to the x. I know what I'm putting in for the x because I already wrote it right here. And it says, replacing it, so put parentheses, and I'm putting in 0. Write the next part of the equation, plus 12. I need the y because that's what I'm looking for, is the y. Equals 36. Okay, yet again, now you just have to solve your equation. Get the ladder that you have completely by itself. So yet again, this works nice and pretty, 0. So you have 12y. Remember that it's always assumed to be positive if I don't put anything in front of it. 36. Okay, in this case, I have to undo the 12 times. So divide by 12. And I get y equals 3. Remember, being very careful. They're going to test you on how you get those variables in those points. So which one is the x-intercept, which one's the y-intercept. They're just going to move around the same numbers for your choices. I'll show you, you'll see that on your quiz next week. So in this case, the point, remember, is an x first. What do we put in for x? We put in 0, so it's 0. And my y we solved, and we got a 3. So this is your y-intercept. And keep in mind, multiple choice ain't going to mess with you. They're going to ask if, they're going to say this is your x-intercept, that's your y. You're looking for specifically what matches. So you've got x-intercept, 4, 0, y-intercept, 0, 3. Pay close attention to details, especially with multiple choice. So that's your intercept. It's pretty straightforward. Let me know if you have questions with it, and then we'll work on some more of that. The last question, find the slope of the line containing the 2 points. So it's only the slope equation. I have to do some slope intercept and that stuff later, but it wasn't on the homework. I got to figure out why. So we might be adding that to next week's stuff as a warning. So slope. So the slope is always just the slant or the grade of a line. It's how steep something is. And it's, in general, on graphs in science classes, you'll sometimes see a delta y over delta x. The delta just means changes. Okay, which in math, we got to make it look more complicated. So it's just going to be y of the second point. That's just an index. That little 2 doesn't mean square it. It's just location. So that's y of the second point minus y of the first point over x of the second point. I always go to the same point to start with, minus x of the first point. Okay. Now, we also give a variable for slope. And I think of slope as how I move from one point to the other. And the letters that they give you is slope is represented by an m. So I think of m for move, and that's slope. So we're going to have questions like find All right, so I have steps. I always have steps. Sometimes I don't say them, but I always have steps. Steps. 1. Label your points. And remember, points are always a number, comma, another number. And then your second point would be a number and another number. So what I want you to do with your points is label them. I'll use X. This is my first point, so X1, Y1, because remember it goes X, Y, and that's my first point. And then X2, Y2. So that means X is my second point, Y is my second point. So looking at it in my problem, this is X, first point. And it's quite important because there's a thing of you get a little bit ahead of yourself, and signs can be not so pretty. And they will test you with a negative sign. Okay, step 2, write the slope formula. Yet again, that seems to be something that people like to try to skip because you're like, I already have it written on the page. But if you write it right by your problem, there's less chance of putting something in the wrong spot or switching order or missing a negative sign. All of the things that are very easy, especially for me to do. 1 over x2 minus x1. And if you need to, please refer to the actual formula and make sure you're copying it in the right direction. Because the points can switch around, you can mix and match, and the big important thing of why a lot of things that they'll do is, notice how your point is x comma y, but when you're looking at the slope formula, you're starting with the y. So that's another thing that can kind of mess with people. So step 2, write the formula. Step 3, use parentheses. Okay, shorthand for parentheses. And plug in the numbers. For x1, y1, x2, y2. So you're going to use parentheses and you're just plugging stuff in. Anything that's part of the equation I'm going to keep in green. And for once I'm actually going to work to the right. Usually I work down, but when I have fractions and I'm substituting it in, I have an easier time. So I keep things horizontal. So starting with m equals, so I have a fraction bar. That's part of the equation. So y2 is a negative 2. Actually, I want to put it in blue. Okay. Okay, so blue, this is y2. That's something I have. I'm replacing it with a negative 2. Notice how I keep it in parentheses. The minus is part of your equation, so stay there. y1, putting in parentheses, negative 4. All right, going to the bottom. x2, that's something I have, so using the blue. x2 is a 4. That minus sign is part of your equation, so I keep it the way it is. And then I'm putting in x1, which in this case is a negative 2. So that is all I'm doing for step 3. Step 4. Deal with the parentheses. Which is another way of saying simplify. Okay, so just starting from the top, that negative 2, I don't have anything attached to it or in front of it, so I'm just doing, I didn't really need those parentheses, I had it first spot. But then I come to a minus minus, and remember, a negative times a negative is a positive, so minus minus becomes a plus. And then I still have the 4. Okay? Down on the bottom, a plain old 4 in parentheses, nothing I can do with it, there's nothing attached to it, either front or back, there's so nothing to distribute, so this is a 4. A minus minus again. 2 negatives make a positive. So I do that. And that's all I really want you to do in step 4. You can combine step 4 and 5 if you really want to. You don't have to. Simplify. And by simplifying, it's the top. Then the bottom. Then reduce. Okay, so thinking the top. Negative numbers, gotta think of those again. They're not going away. So negative 2, it's like I went down 2 steps, and then I'm going plus 4, so I'm going up 4. I end up at above ground, and it's a 2 steps above. And then on the bottom, I have a 4 plus 2, which I know is 6, which becomes, because I have to reduce, again, divide the top and bottom by 2. And I like to write this because fractions can disappear. So 2 divided by 2 is a 1. And then 6 divided by 2 is a 3. So I still have the bigger number on the bottom, because if I'm paying attention to the 2 over 6, bigger numbers on the bottom, so I still need the bigger number on the bottom. If I just left it as a 3, I no longer have the bottom. So that is your slope. We're occasionally going to be using that to get the equation of the line, but for your homework, all you have to do is find the slope. Okay, so which really does mean I need to add more questions on slopes and graphing to next week's homework, which is going to be find the equation of a line through certain points, and find the equation of a line with specific information. But I will make another video for that and put that on next week's homework as well. So this is the nutshell of what you need to do questions 10 through 20 on your homework. Remember, if you're looking for any points in the lines, you can plug in any number you want for X or for Y. Just keep everything organized and remember points are always X, comma, Y. All right, so please let me know if you have questions on anything. Keep working on all your information. I'm very impressed with all of the effort you guys are all putting in. And let me know how you're doing on stuff. Thanks very much.